Ekkehardt Mueller, Associate Director, retired Associate Director of the Biblical Research Institute, although I'm still working for the Biblical Research Institute of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And with me is Dr. Daniel Bediako. I should briefly say something about him, and if you want, Daniel, you can share some things also. Dr. Bediako is an Old Testament scholar, so he has a PhD in Old Testament studies, and he has worked as the Vice Chancellor of Valley View University in Ghana. In other words, in our terms, that would mean he was president and is president of the university there, but he is also a scholar, and while he works there with all his administrative load, he still gets involved in writing and editing. And the work that we want to introduce to you, and I will show that momentarily here, is a book that he has edited. I have helped him a bit, and let me increase that. The book is not in print, it is available online. So there is no print version yet, therefore I have to show you here this slide. But this is what it looks like, and it's available. We will talk about that a little later. So the topic is the Sabbath in the Old Testament and the Intertestamental period, implications for Christians in the 21st century. So I will stop that here and have a question here for you, Daniel. There are quite a number of books on the market dealing with the Sabbath from different perspectives. Even recently, a number of evangelicals have published books. Now, these new books include also now the book that you have edited, Sabbath in the Old Testament. Why was it decided to write another book on this subject? Actually, there will be two books because the New Testament volume is forthcoming. So why another book on the Sabbath?
Okay, thank you, Ekkehardt, and those listening also. Yeah, I think that, as you mentioned, there have been many books that are on the market. Some of the books have challenged the Adventist perspective on the Sabbath in Scripture, and others have also enriched our understanding. And so it became necessary to maybe indirectly respond by responding to those books that challenge our perspective, and also harness those that have enriched our understanding to do. But let me say that the last major publication on the Sabbath by Adventist scholars was published in 1982, which had been in the works for about 10 years before it was published. And since then, as you mentioned, more books have been published. So I would say that there has been a need for us to come up with this publication. And in fact, in that book, the focus of that book was more on history instead of on theology or scripture. So, for example, in that book, only 2 chapters are actually dedicated to the Old OT, the Old
Testament.
Old Testament, and which only 2 chapters, and these are less than 10% of the volume itself. So you can understand that the focus was more on history instead of biblical text.
Now I want to come back to that question, but ask another question first. What would we envision to be the audience of the book? So to whom did we write this book?
I think the book was written primarily for Seventh-day Adventist scholars, students, pastors, teachers, and also other scholars who are non-Adventist, so they they will understand our perspective on the Sabbath, basically. So it's basically for everyone, even church members.
So in other words, church members could also read that.
Yes. It's church members. Although it's actually done by scholars, the language is good that church members can actually read and understand it.
Yeah. So in other words, we have aimed to reach informed church members who have not studied theology, and they may still be able to understand what we are saying.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but it is also written for scholars. And you pointed, and now let me return to the previous response. So you pointed to this book which was edited by Dr. Kenneth Strand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this book is out of print. This book is out of print, and it was more limited, as you said, in scope. Yeah, so this new Sabbath project is a wider project than it was in the past, dealing now extensively with the Old Testament. When we discuss before we go there. So if you look at the Adventist market, so you will find all kinds of books on the Sabbath, oftentimes easy to read. And this one is a little more deeper that we have. If you look at the non-Adventist market, there is a new interest with quite a number of authors to regain the issue of rest in a restless world, to regain the Sabbath from that perspective, to have rest in all the hectic and the hustle of bustle of life. And so they write wonderful books on that. How would they differ yet from what we have done?
Okay, thank you very much. As I hinted already, some of these books that have come out, some have even challenged the biblical origins of this Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And so this book establishes or emphasizes that the Sabbath originated at creation. It emphasizes the fact that it is permanent and it is universal. And so it is one thing to say that, okay, let me just rest. And it's another thing to understand that this is God's will, that we rest and worship him on the Sabbath. We have communion with him and our family and our fellow humans. So
and you are talking about the seventh day, correct?
Yes, the seventh day Sabbath, the seventh day Sabbath. And so that for me, we are with the book actually, it stays with the text, with the Bible, the biblical Sabbath. So I think that is a difference we can mention.
I should mention this book was not written by you and me.
Oh, no, of course.
I mean, you contributed a chapter, but we have many authors here.
Yes.
Different authors. Yes. And we will go into that a little later. Now, when we discuss the Sabbath, there are different perspectives that we could take. For example, you can take a closer look at biblical passages. Yeah. Or you take a look at one single passage. Yeah. It is also possible to ask, what is the wider meaning, the theology of the Sabbath? Yeah. Then there is the question of how to keep the Sabbath. So Sabbath in a practical way. So then, in addition to that, as you have pointed out in the other book, there were chapters in that other book showing the historical development over time of the Sabbath issue, yeah, especially in church history. Yeah. So what does this book more precisely contain?
Okay, this book, it's organized into 3 sections. The first section deals with exegesis, or a study of specific biblical texts, passages from Genesis chapter 2, then in Exodus, in Leviticus, Numbers, all through, so that's the first section: specific texts, biblical passages in the OT. Then the second section focuses on the themes, thematic perspectives. So, for example, one article is dedicated to the origin of the Sabbath. Scholars have had this long-term, debate whether the Sabbath originated from the other parts and Israel copied us. So, so the origins of the Sabbath is one topic. Then also the theology and character of the creation Sabbath. That's also dealt with. And then the Sabbath and the covenant, the Sabbath and even the covenant, the old and the new covenant. Then a chapter on the Sabbath, whether it is a day of rest or a day of worship. And the author does very wonderful work that the Sabbath was a day of worship also, which is clear in the text.
Both, a day of rest and a day of worship.
Yes, but many people have thought that the Sabbath was basically a day of rest, but it was also a day of worship. Yes.
Yeah, I remember I have read a book by an evangelical author, and it started out with Sabbath as a day of rest. So the author found that it is necessary in our time to have Sabbath, you have the rest of the Sabbath. Yeah. But in her development later on, she found other dimensions, as you pointed out. It is not just rest, it is worship. It is also not just worship, it's also community, fellowship. Yeah.
Yes. And so in that section also we have the Sabbath and the other feasts, the
Jewish feast,
major feasts or festivals in the Old Testament. That is a chapter. Then the last chapter in that section deals with the Sabbath and how to keep the Sabbath. And that's a very powerful study. Then the last section of the book, it deals with the concept of the Sabbath in Jewish literature in the intertestamental period.
So can you explain what the intertestamental period is?
Intertestamental period, we normally call that period the Second Temple period. Between the end of the Old Testament period to even the 2nd century AD. Roughly, that's the Second Temple, or maybe.
So there is a gap of several hundred years.
Yes.
Between Old and New Testament, and this is the intertestamental period.
Exactly.
So and in this period, other literature was written.
Yes, other literature was written. We call some the Apocrypha, Pseudepigrapha, and other passages, other texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls. All this were actually written there.
Yeah, thank you. That helps us. So you see, it's quite comprehensive. It deals with what we call exegesis, the study of biblical passages from Genesis through the prophets in the Old Testament. It deals with the question of theology, the practical side. Actually, this chapter has an interesting heading: Torah's 7 vibrant dimensions of Sabbath rest.
Yes.
Okay, and then we have this very interesting aspect of the time between the testaments, the Old and the New Testament. Now you have been asked, this is a personal question.
Okay.
You have been asked to be one of the editors of this volume. How did you feel when you were invited to take on this responsibility?
Well, Ekkehardt, I must confess, I felt very humbled. There are far better scholars and editors in the church than myself. So me being asked to help edit this book, I really I felt humbled. And so I said, well, let me do my best. And so I also took the opportunity. For me, I saw it also as an opportunity to actually learn more. And I have actually enjoyed working with you. Of course, you have been the general editor, for these works, and I appreciate so much having worked under you and with you on this project. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was really nice. See, the issue is if you write a book, if you have a single author who writes a book, it's a different story as if you have maybe 15 authors or so writing a book. And you have to deal with all these authors. You have to edit the documents, and I have to go back to the authors. Maybe you can tell us a little more about how, because this is how that works, this process, because it's a very long process until we got to the publication of that book. So how does that work?
Okay, I think much of it you are the best person to answer this question. Maybe let me say something, then I'll ask you the question.
Okay.
In my part, where I came in, I came in late actually to edit this film. The papers start coming to BRICOM. The scholars, they discuss the papers and point out the strengths and the weaknesses. They go back to the authors. So when BRICOM is okay with the paper, then they give it to the editor to start work. Mm-hmm. And so that alone, I remember some papers were written as far back as 2007, 2008, and so that is a long process. So, and of course, when the papers come and you are doing the editing, when you have issues, you may have to get back to the authors to clarify some things, checking sources. Mm-hmm. But I think that beyond that, you as a general editor, you have done more work. You are signing the papers.
Okay, so I can say a little more.
Yes. So tell us. Okay.
This project was originally designed by the Biblical Research Institute, and the Biblical Research Institute of the General Conference has a larger committee which consists of about 40 members. These are scholars, theologians, and a few administrators, and it was also discussed there. And so finally, the project was lined out. We said, this is what we want to do. These are the chapters that we need for such a book, or actually several volumes of books. So this is what we need. And then we had to look for authors. This is where the process started. Yeah. So we have lined out that we have a kind of table of content already ready, and then we find our authors. We ask the authors to write for us. Now, typically it takes at least half a year to get a paper because our people are very busy. And when these scholars have submitted their papers, these papers are read in what you have called BRICOM. This is the Biblical Research Institute Committee. This is this large committee of scholars, and so the paper is being critiqued. And typically, I have not very seldom seen that there was not a suggestion to make changes.
Yeah.
Typically, and this is not because the papers are bad. Normally, it is just to improve that, because you have people from different perspectives and different specialties, and they contribute with their knowledge and make suggestions to the author. So it goes back to the author. The author rewrites the paper or makes changes to the paper, and it comes a second time to the committee. Now, by that time, you have already at least a year has passed, 1.5 years, and so on. And then you start the same process all over. So in other words, that is a strongly peer-reviewed process. Yeah. And when this is done, then it comes to the editors. So, and to the BRI members, the members of the Biblical Research Institute, they take a look at this again, and the editor works on that. And so the editor, and in this case you, and I have helped you a bit, the editor would suggest also further changes and so on. And in some cases, there's not much to do. I mean, editing is still heavy. Yeah, this is a heavy load, but some papers are more easy to do, and others, there's more to be added. So you then have to go back to the author, discuss things with the authors. And after all of this is done, and the authors are agreed, then comes the entire process of how to publish the book. Yeah, it goes to the copy editor, it goes to layout, with the publishing house, you have to make contracts and whatever. And finally, this product is ready. So it took us a little more than 10 years. And this is due to this process, which is different from other books, yeah, because of this peer review process. Now, when you read the papers, and you were a member also of the larger committee,
Yeah.
maybe not the entire time, but you joined, I think, later.
I joined in 2011.
Yeah, okay. So, but reading the papers again, first of all, hearing the papers being discussed, then with the scholars. So they read the paper, they discuss that. Sometimes a paper is being discussed for 2 hours after it has been read, maybe sometimes even longer, sometimes shorter, in this larger group. So, but I guess when you were reading the paper, you still did learn something about that.
Sure.
Can you tell us something what helped you to understand more deeply in this editing process the issue of the Sabbath in the Old Testament?
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Ekkehardt. Yes, I learned many things, even at BRICOM, and how people argue points and the depths of knowledge and the mastery of the subject. And but as I read these papers as editor, during the edit, sometimes I would pause and see that I think we are making a very strong case. And we are seeing the Sabbath not just as the Sabbath is not just a legal requirement to be observed. It is not a legal boundary not to cross. It is a feast that we are invited to. We are invited to celebrate the Sabbath day as a feast. Of course, it was introduced at creation. And it kept reminding me that, the Sabbath actually reminds us of God's creatorship and his lordship, and reminds us of his continuous care for his creation. It reminds also of his sanctifying presence, continue in a world of sin and, problems, challenges, catastrophes. It is comforting to know that God is present with us, and especially also on the Sabbath. And so, in the end, let me say that the book, the authors come to the point to affirm that the Sabbath affords us the opportunity to enter into special communion with the Creator and Redeemer, and with our families, and to enjoy nature. I think that this point came out very clearly. So maybe let me say this is what in summary, this is what I actually learned also.
Yeah. So in other words, while this aspect of rest is especially important for people in the 21st century.
Yes.
And I guess it's not just the Western world. We are so much pressed by appointments and things to do. I mean, we have devices which are supposed to make life easier, but we press even more on, and the life does not slow down. Yeah. So if we didn't have the Sabbath, we could get crazy in all the hustle and bustle of life. But so there is, as we have pointed out, and as Yusuf has pointed out, so there's more to the Sabbath than just this dimension. Yes. Now, let me bring up another question briefly. It is not disputed that Israel, and then the nation of Israel, later the Jews, kept the Sabbath. This is not the issue.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, everyone would acknowledge that.
Sure.
The issue is Sabbath today.
Yeah.
So, and maybe we can go back briefly and say, so why was it then necessary? Why would we not just study the New Testament? Why is it necessary to look and have an entire volume on Sabbath in the Old Testament?
Okay, thank you very much. No doubt the Sabbath the Sabbath is presented strongly and clearly in the Old Testament. And that gives the foundation of the Sabbath, the 7-day Sabbath. If we were just to study the New Testament and then forget about even the Sabbath at creation, we may be tempted to think that, well, the Sabbath was just for the people of Israel. But, creation is not about Israel. Creation is human being, Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. And so we cannot do a study of the Sabbath focusing only on the New Testament. We will the Sabbath from creation, the Sabbath in the Old Testament history, the Sabbath in the sanctuary, the Sabbath and worship. All these are themes, Sabbath and rest. These are themes that we pick from the Old Testament and add those in the NT. So I feel it is very important that we put it there.
Yeah, so while it is important for us, the practical implication is how to joyfully keep Sabbath.
Yes.
Enjoy the Sabbath and experience Sabbath as a delight. Yet we have to understand the deeper dimension, because otherwise it could easily be just a day of vacation. But the Sabbath has a divine dimension. It relates to God. And God has also pointed out that it should be a certain day. And not just any day.
But a certain day.
I think this is the importance of our discussion here. Now, so let me briefly share the screen again. So this is the book, and here for our audience, this is the table of contents. This is what Daniel has mentioned, the exegetical perspectives. You have a chapter on the Sabbath in the Pentateuch, that is the 5 books of Moses, then in the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, in the book of Numbers, and it goes on there. And at the end here, chapter 6 is the Sabbath and the prophets. Then we have these thematic perspectives. And see, this is also what Daniel mentioned, the origin of the Sabbath, Sabbath at creation, covenant. We have covered this, and then the intertestamental period. So, if you are interested to purchase that volume, where would you get it? And here's the answer. You find it at Amazon. Amazon.com. So it is very easy. What you can do, enter there in the search line, Biblical Research Institute. And if you do that, there are 3 volumes which have recently been published, and they come up. And you see the first one here is the Sabbath volume. The second one is one on biblical hermeneutics. That means how to interpret scripture. And the last one is on biblical eschatology. These are the last events. Okay. You can also visit the website of the Biblical Research Institute. You will find hints there, but momentarily there is no print version available, as I mentioned before. The book can be ordered at Amazon, as I said, and it would be a Kindle version. Now, for those who have scholarly interest or who need to quote or so, Kindle in the past was not so helpful. I have some books, some commentaries on Kindle, but there was no page number, and if you change the font, it is changing. This has been remedied now. So if you go to the book, you really see, and I have purchased that book myself as a Kindle version, although I have the original manuscript. So you really see this fixed like a PDF, and this is very helpful. The price is very reasonable. We kept the cheap price so that it is easily available. So this may help our audience about the book Sabbath in the Old Testament, and actually the title was a little different, and implications for us today. And this is very crucial. Daniel, thank you very much for the time you took that we could talk about briefly. If you want anything to add or something comes in your mind, still time.
Well, thank you also, Ekkehardt, for this. I appreciate this. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, it has been a learning process for me, and I've gathered some very good experience that I can use for the future, and I appreciate your scholarship and this thing. So thank you very much, and I will appeal to as many church members as possible to get a copy of this book.
Yeah. We also encourage non-Adventists to take a look at this.
Yes.
While there is an appreciation, as I said, about the Sabbath, even if the Sabbath is not always kept as the seventh day, I think there are dimensions that can be added to the debate, and this is what we have hoped to do. So it is very valuable, this book, and we hope it is a blessing for many. So all the best for you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Ekkehardt. Have a good day.
You too.
All right.